What's happening, party people? Welcome to Punchboard Party. This is a one-take, hot take all about Risk Shadow Forces. This was just announced today, Saturday, October 23rd, and people are buzzing. So this is a spiritual successor to Risk Legacy. We're going to be able to get our hands on this a full year from now, so fall 2022. But we got some inside scoop about what this game is all about. And this spiritual successor to Risk Legacy, which came out 10 years ago now from Rob Daviau and Chris Dupuis, which that game just changed the landscape of board games forever, right? We wouldn't have Pandemic Legacy, we wouldn't have Gloomhaven, we wouldn't have all these other legacy style games where you can rip up the cards, change the board, where the game mechanisms develop and grow, the story that the characters in the game or the players themselves experience develops and grows as it goes. It really just changed how we play games and how we design games forever. So I think the hobby is really indebted to Risk Legacy, and so kind of a sequel of sorts to Risk Legacy is very exciting for a lot of people. I'm not a huge Legacy game fan. You know this about me. I just can't get a game to the table that many times to really warrant, but I have a special appreciation for what games like this have done to the hobby and how much fans of the genre love the genre. But there's a couple of things that make me very excited about this game. But first, tell me in the comments down below, are you still playing regular Risk? Do you bring out Risk to play at family functions, Thanksgivings, Christmases, that kind of thing? Is it a game that is still looked fondly upon by you and yours? Let me know down below. And if you have any experiences with Risk Legacy, let me know. Is that a game that just kind of blew your mind when it first came out, or that you came back to later and it still holds a special place in your heart? Let me know down below there. So the design team around this, we're looking at Chris Nadeau is sort of the main sort of publisher at Avalon Hill. He's the main guy there, and he's brought on Craig Van Ness onto the sort of the development and design team for this project for Risk Shadow Forces. And Craig Van Ness, he comes to us from things like HeroScape and Star Wars Queen's Gambit, which kind of recreated the three end battles from Episode 1 Phantom Menace, where you have the space battle, you have the land battle on Tatooine, you have Darth Maul versus Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so it kind of took you and allowed you to sort of play out these three simultaneous battles. And I mention that because I think it comes into play in one of the core mechanics in this game. But let's get to what those things are. So the big thing happening here is that you have these warlords that you are going to recruit, and you are going to play probably about 15 games of Risk Shadow Forces, and you're going to play with the same warlord the whole time around. And they all have their own kind of play style, special ability, that you'll be able to play during the two different kind of phases of the game, and they're going to give you different benefits. So one faction, or one warlord, sorry, allows you to deploy troops mid-round, not just at the end of your movement, but mid-movement you can deploy troops. Another warlord allows you to kind of attack with troops out of nowhere, kind of bring new forces into play that kind of sneak up on your opponents. So this kind of thing, they bring kind of special powers. But then the other thing is that there's these factions, and you're not necessarily going to be playing with the same faction from game to game, but at the beginning of the game you're going to draft factions, and so you're going to actually pair your warlord with a faction and hope the abilities of your warlords pair nicely with the abilities of the factions you drafted. And so there's also going to be sort of faction cards where, because it's a legacy game, at the beginning of the game you're going to choose between two different sort of faction special abilities, one that you're going to be able to use in that game and throughout the games, and I'm sure that there's ways to develop those abilities that you use, but then one of those abilities you're never going to see again, right? So there's this cool kind of ability to combine your warlord and your factions together. The thing that has me really excited is that not only do you have the global game, so you still have the dudes on a map, traditional Risk style game where you got all sorts of troops and armies and things going around on the board, and you're focused on movement and getting things kind of set up nicely for your attacks. But then when it comes to the battle, there's these separate sideboards that you use that recreate a skirmish situation. So you kind of zoom in from the big battle to this particular skirmish, and then you're going to play kind of a skirmish game, kind of a mini game within the game, where your warlord is going to have different abilities and you're going to be able to move with them in different ways and fight with them, and kind of a more tactical game in there. And I just love this idea. I've had all sorts of ideas in the past for game designs, nothing I pulled the trigger on, of course, but just having sort of a world map, and then you zoom in periodically to do a particular thing, and then zoom out, sort of like an old school Final Fantasy VII style RPG where you're going around the map, but then you zoom into the town. But this is in a war. You have the big war going on, and then you zoom into a particular skirmish or battle, and then you zoom back out. Very excited about this mechanism, and a little nervous about, will this mechanism kind of draw out the game, kind of make it lag, or is it still going to be smooth? It was like, okay, we're in a battle, let's go with the skirmish board, have out our battle, instead of having a roll of the dice, having to do sort of movement and tactics and setting up moves. Just how much longer is that going to make the game feel? I'm just worried about that. So let me know in the comments down below, does this kind of zoom in, zoom out dynamic for Risk Shadow Forces excite you? Or are you worried about how that's going to affect the smoothness of the gameplay? Let me know your thoughts. The other thing that this game is bringing to our attention is the fact that Risk Legacy, the story, while it developed and the different game mechanisms grew, by the end, what people kind of tend to say is that it was a fairly kind of incoherent, chaotic end result that you had. It was cool that everything developed, but you kind of, lost track of kind of a single narrative. Whereas Risk Shadow Forces promises a more coherent, kind of singular story, while still retaining the fact that you were developing and growing that story as players around the table, and you were creating the story. So stronger narratively is the promise from Risk Shadow Forces. And I gotta say that right off the hop, just the theme. So we're in the future, we're in the year 2050, everything that we're afraid of now, climate change, political unrest, all these sorts of things, it's really come to a head now. And so the world is just a real dumpster fire. But now you have these warlords that rise up, and it just, the theming is kind of this like, just kind of before Mad Max, and you got this sort of contemporary Molotov cocktails, dumpsters burning in the streets feel, kind of this sort of like a neo-guerrilla warfare style. So I just like the images that we've been seeing so far from this, where it really kind of evokes that kind of pre-post-apocalyptic warfare, which I really gravitate towards and really enjoy. And so I think there's a lot of rich story to be had just kind of in the world that they're already setting up. So I'm excited for that too. So party people, what are you excited for about Risk Shadow Forces? Do you think this looks really cool? Are you ready for another Risk Legacy game? Good on Risk for continuing to reinvent itself and continue to put itself on the front lines of the hobby. So if you're interested, check it out. Pre-order it if you want. This is not a paid preview by any means, but just if you're excited about it, check it out. I know that I'm just going to hold off like I usually do with Legacy games, but this kind of dual board situation where you have the global warfare and then the skirmish warfare, it has me enticed and excited. Well, until next time, party people, have the best day.